Hola clase, bienvenidos de regreso al video de los verbos, parte 2. So now that we've talked about the difference between infinitive and conjugated and when to use them, now let's talk purely about conjugations of verbs. So the most important thing to know about conjugating verbs is the pronoun or the subject. What is the subject? Let's see if we can remember what the subject is. The subject is the person doing the action. So without knowing who's doing the action, we can't conjugate the verb properly. So the ending of the verb has to match the person doing the action. The ending of the verb and the subject have to be the same when you are conjugating. So the pronouns that we learned for the subject are I, you, he, she, and it, or he, she, and you formal. Nosotros, which is us, vosotros, which is you all in Spain, so y'all pretty much, and then ellos, ellas, and ustedes. We haven't been focusing on learning the vosotros form in this class because you probably won't interact with too many Spanish speakers here in Boise, Idaho. You're going to be interacting more with Spanish speakers from Latin America or Mexico primarily, because that's where we have the most influence from. So that's why we're focusing on primarily Latin Spanish, but you do need to know that vosotros exists, and that's where it would fall on the chart. So just remember that in this column over here, we always have singular, and then we always have the first person on the top line and the second person on the second line and the third person on the bottom line. If you don't know what first person, second person, third person means, it's just the person speaking, the person spoken to, and the person spoken about. So I am the speaker, you are the one I'm talking to, and then he, she, it is the person we're talking about. So this column over here is always singular, this column over here is always plural, and this is the exact same layout that your verb charts are always going to have. So the yo form is always going to be in this box, the to form is always going to be in this box, the he, she, or it, or usted form is always going to be in this box, the nosotros form here, the vosotros form there, the ellos, ellas, ustedes form is always going to be here, and etc. This is an interesting note that you need to remember also, though, that because the verb ending matches the subject, you don't have to include the pronouns in your sentences unless you desire to emphasize or clarify whatever you're talking about. Alright, I hope that explains that. Now, we look into verbos regulares. If you want to look at them made simple, go underneath this video to the Synergy Spanish System explanation and listen to their audio portion and read through their thing, and maybe that'll help you understand your Spanish verbs just a little better. In this class, we have to focus on a little bit more of a wide base than he does. But hopefully that maybe he can help you simplify your understanding of Spanish verbs as well. So these are the regular verbs. This is the vast majority of Spanish verbs, and it's not going to feel like that to you very much because they're so simple, and it seems like we're always talking about exceptions to the rule. But in English, we have way more exceptions to the rule than they have in Spanish. So the regular verbs, this is going to be the structure for all regular verbs and most of the irregular verbs as well, just in pieces and parts here and there. One or two might be different, or etc. So just watch for those explanations and exceptions to the rule. But for right now, all regular verbs, which is the majority of them, are conjugated as you can see here. So every AR verb is going to end with an O, A, amos, an. O, A, amos, you're going to just take the original ending of the verb, you're going to cross it off, and you're going to put the right ending depending on who's doing the speaking. If it's I speak, then it's hablo. You speak, it's habla. If it's he, she, or it speaks, it's habla. If nosotros speak, it's hablamos. And if it's them speaking, then it's hablan. Or you guys speaking, it's hablan. And so the endings are very similar. Don't have to worry about memorizing too many different endings. If you look at it, this A just kind of travels down throughout all of them. Except for the yo form, obviously it's just yo, o, and then it's amos, an. And then this, for er, the yo is the same, o, and then it's the exact same ending, amos, en, except for it uses an e, like the original verb, instead of an a. So it's very simple. You still have an S on the end of the to form. You use the original vowel for the other parts. You still have a mos on the nosotros form. So think about nos, mos, they rhyme. And then you still have an N on the plural form. So it's just the difference is the vowel, but the vowel was different in the original. So just use the original vowel and the ending for all of them, and you will have it correct. IR verbs and ER verbs are best friends. They do everything together, except for they have to have their little unique spots. So IR and ER match in this shape of all the way down this side and this bottom one. They match, but the IR verb keeps its I in the nosotros form, and that's it. So that's the only difference you have to remember between the ER and the IR verb. So I hope that helps. Those are all regular verbs. That is huge majority of Spanish verbs, and all the verbs that we learned in the first couple chapters are all regular verbs. And most AR verbs will always be regular. The ER ones and the IR ones will have the most exceptions. The major irregular verbs there's 6 of them, but you only have to worry about 3 in Spanish 101. Well, you have to worry about 4, but for right now, all you have to worry about is 3. Ir, ser, and estar. Those 3 you've already learned up to this point, but they're always going to be irregular, and they spell out the word dishes. So when you continue your Spanish studies later, know that every time you see the verb dar, ir, ser, haber, estar, or saber, they will always be irregular. So kind of be looking out for those and make sure that you know which ones you're using. But for right now, all you need to know is ir, ser, and estar. And saber, which we learned in last chapter, right? But for right now, just ir, ser, and estar are the major ones. Saber is only irregular in the yo form. Remember, it was say. So, ir is voy, vas, va, vamos, van. Watch the Señor Wooly videos if you don't remember that. Soy, eres, es, somos, son, so ser. And watch the Señor Wooly videos again if you don't remember that. And estoy, estás, está, estamos, están. Remember that in these yellow forms, you have the A with an accent mark. Nowhere else you have the A with an accent mark. But remember, you have to have that accent mark so you can distinguish it from the this, that, these, and those that we learned also last week. All right. That's your irregular verbs. Those are the 3 major irregular verbs. And now remember we learned about irregular yo forms, like yo go verbs, tango, hago, salgo, etc. Yo, go verbs just have a go in yo form instead of the simple o. And just a note, when the yo go verbs are also stem changing, the yo form doesn't change. So, for example, tango, there's no stem change there. But you do have a stem change in the other three forms, where there generally is one. Good, so let's look at stem changes. These are also called boot verbs because they change in the shape of a boot, if you can kind of see that. It's tall on one side and flat and short on the other, so people call that the shape of a boot. So there's three types of stem change. Remember, you have E to IE, O to UE, and E to I. There's very few stem changers that are E to I. So the two that you have to worry about are E to IE and O to UE. And there's no way to confuse the E to IE and the O to UE because the original vowel is either an E or an O. And if it's an E, then it has to change to IE. And if it's an O, then it has to change to UE. So I'm giving you examples of the major ones. This one had an E, so it changes to an IE. Quiero, quieres, quiere, queremos, quieren. And remember, it only changes in the form of the boot, so the nosotros form never changes. Poder, puedo, puedes, puede, podemos, pueden. Remember, once again, nosotros doesn't change. And then servir is a good example of the E to I form. And the only way to tell the difference between E to IE and E to I is to memorize them separately. Like I said, there's only like 3 or 4 that are E to I, so just memorize which 4 those are, and then everything else is E to IE. And most of the time, your textbook's always going to tell you which stem change that is. If it's on a test, you may not know, but just make sure you're comfortable with all the most important verbs. And there's one funky one, jugar. There are no other verbs just like jugar. It's a U to UE stem change, and so you learn that one just by itself. Juego, juegas, juega, jugamos, juegan. And almost all stem changers are ER or IR verbs, meaning that the infinitive form ends in ER or IR. Jugar, once again, is the major exception, the only exception to that rule. That ends in AR and happens to be a stem changer. So it's very rare that you will ever see an AR verb that's a stem changer other than jugar. And that one's a weird one. So, special things. When we get into verbs, reflexive verbs next chapter, all we're doing is everything we learned before. Stem changing verbs, irregular verbs, and regular verbs. Those 3 types. So we learned regulars and we built on that and said, okay, here's a couple of irregular ones. And then we said, okay, now that you know how to do regular ones, the endings are still the same. O, as, a, amosan, o, es, e, emosen, o, es, e, emosen, o, es, e, emosen. The endings are all the same. Now we just add a little bit of a change. So once we get to the reflexive verbs, and I'm going to go over this one next chapter, you will you'll be doing all those same things and just adding one more little change to them, or not even a change, an addition to them. So we'll go over reflexive verbs next week. But for now, just remember you have 3 types of verbs. You have your regulars, your irregulars, and your stem changers. Go watch the video, Cry Me a Verb, and I hope you enjoy it. Hasta pronto, clase.